This is Marco Reus.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Sahin.
Hello, this is Jadon Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellowwallpod podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 381 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your host Stefan Butzko, and today we will talk about Edin Terzic becoming Borussia Dortmund's technical director, the signing of Gregor Kobel, and we will take a look at the rumor mill and what positions we might need to improve this summer. For that and more joins me Matthias Zug. Hello Matthias, how are you doing?
Aside from a head cold, I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. And also here Lars Perlmann. Hello Lars, how are you doing?
Hello Stefan, I'm fine.
Very good, very good. Also fine apparently is Edin Terzic because he has a contract until 2025 and has assumed the role of technical director, which I assume was sort of created for him. I think he explained it this way that as they were sitting all together, Zorc, Watzke, Kehl, etc., during their season analysis, that this was sort of the thing he wanted to do. And I think he jokingly said that essentially he is now the assistant coach of Michael Zorc and Sebastian Kehl instead of Marco Rose. Now, obviously, that was already a decision that came up during the news conference of Marco Rose when he was presented to the public. Matthias, what do you think of this move that Borussia Dortmund sort of created a role for Edin Terzic where he is, I guess, an intermediary between team and the front office, is involved in squad planning and, taking care of players that are on loan, like all these responsibilities. So he says he's working in tandem with Otto Addo there. What are you making of this sort of job, and how do you think it will suit Edin Terzic, and how important is it for Borussia Dortmund that despite offers from other Bundesliga clubs and I guess other clubs from other countries that he wanted to stay put and sort of generated a role for himself? And what does it say that he in the end is not the assistant manager of Marco Rose as has it been previously communicated? Long question, but now you can go.
Well, I mean, that requires like 20 different answers there. I read through what he said about it, and it seemed, this was his request. And the way I saw the words from Zorc and Watzke is they had actually planned for him to be the assistant. And so this wasn't necessarily something that they had initially envisioned at the end of the season. But it sounds like Edin Terzic, through internal reflection, decided that this was the path he wanted to go. He didn't want to be a coach at a different club. He wanted to stay with Borussia Dortmund. I mean, talk about it. I mean, he lived his dream so intensely in such a short period of time and did such an amazing job under crazy circumstances, both internally and externally, that, how do you actually top that? And in the world of football management, and coaching, which obviously is one that he's been in now for a while, unless you win the Bundesliga or the Champions League, it's hard for him to top that experience immediately. And it feels like he decided, you know what, that was so intense. I don't really want to go into coaching a team that I have no passion for. I want to stick with Borussia Dortmund. I want to learn more about all facets and see what direction. Do I really want to be a coach? Do I want to go into the front office, given his age? I mean, he's still under the age of 40. That makes sense. To not then be the assistant of the person taking his place, even though he knew this move was going to happen essentially when he started. I understand that. It would be awkward. It would be awkward for Marco Rose, even though Marco Rose had only great things to say about him. But once things start going south, because eventually you're going to have a down period. That's just the natural state of everything. And if you have the guy on your bench who led Dortmund to a cup win and the Champions League and a good run in the Champions League, the press will immediately go, so is Terzic going to be the next coach? Is Terzic going to be the next coach? Now, actually, that element is still there, because if things would go really badly, you do have someone you could plug in, which is a luxury. It really is a luxury. So I feel like it makes sense for the club. It makes sense for Terzic. It is a huge statement for Borussia Dortmund as a place you want to be. And again, underlining the character of Edin Terzic, who it's not about the limelight, the big dollars, because he could have cashed in and gone to a club, made a ton of money and stuff like that as a coach. But that apparently is not what intrinsically motivates him. And I find that extraordinarily good and endearing, and something we need in this time, especially in sports, where so many people are just out for basically money and fame. And that just doesn't seem to be his thing at this point.
So, Lars, obviously, Borussia Dortmund have something called the Elefantenrunde, where Zorc, Watzke, the coach, Kehl, Sammer, and so on, I guess, are all sitting around the table and debating things, things of state or whatever of Borussia Dortmund. Terzic now, as far as I know, will obviously be an integral part of this, and the role he has created for himself, I think, is very influential. Something I'm wondering about is how much power and influence do you think Terzic has with the assumption of the role of technical director, and do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing? What's your take on it?
Well, first of all, I'm not necessarily buying the idea that everybody was ready and willing for him to be assistant coach, and him out of the blue more or less deciding, or not necessarily out of the blue, but on his own accord, if you like, deciding that, I don't want to have that role, I want to do something else. I'm pretty sure that everybody's kind of happy they found a solution to keep him around without the awkwardness that Matthias described. I never, and I said this on this podcast a few times, never really made sense to me for Terzic to be an assistant to Rose, because he already has an established coaching team, which he has brought from Gladbach. So I don't know what kind of responsibilities an additional assistant coach would have had, and certainly the benefit of that would have been undermined by the awkwardness, as said before. So I think they wanted to keep him around for obvious reasons. One being he's a great guy to have around. I mean, obviously he loves this club dearly, as he's, I think, proven sufficiently over his 7 months or so in charge of the first team. He can excite people, fans and players alike, for the club. So in whatever ambassadorial context his new role might come in, that will come in handy. I'm not sure that anybody can really make any sort of conclusions as to what his actual responsibilities will be going forward. I mean, there's all these buzzwords, if you like, of things that he's going to be in charge of or be involved in, but does anybody really know what Edin Terzic is going to do Monday to Friday 9 to 5? I don't think that's something that we can assume. So it remains to be seen what his actual responsibilities are. I think personally that he's probably going to be more of a factor going forward once Michael Zorc is out of the picture, at least as sporting director, with obviously Sebastian Kehl getting promoted to that job. Kehl right now heads the department of licensed players, which is basically him being groomed for the sporting director role. I'm assuming that position is not going to be filled next season, so that Terzic is going to have more responsibilities that the right-hand man of the sporting director would have. So in that regard, I think he's going to be more influential going forward. And, having someone with a broad spectrum of experiences can only help in that regard. I mean, he worked in the Premier League, he worked in Turkey, he's now been assistant coach and head coach at Dortmund. He's been involved in the youth department, he's been a scout for Dortmund, so despite his young age that Matthias referenced, he's quite experienced in a lot of different areas of the sport, if you like. More so even than Sebastian Kehl, who has basically been a pro player, a TV expert, and this understudy to Zorc. I think you could make the case that Terzic has a wider range of experiences. So I think that's going to be where his main focus should lie anyway, in helping Kehl, especially early on, because I think the way they've worked for the last 25 or so years, ever since Zorc came into this position, I think in 98 or 2000 or something like that. I think back then this was a one-man job, being the sporting director. Not many clubs had like a big backroom staff for that department, and given all the demands on pro football clubs these days, I think it's imperative to have more than one set of capable hands. And I think, if nothing else, Edin Terzic has proven to love Dortmund dearly, to be a capable set of hands in a few different areas. So keeping him around is definitely good news, even though I don't think anybody can really say with any kind of certainty what exactly he's going to do.
Yeah, I think in general it helps Sebastian Kehl that Terzic is still around, because I think Dortmund maybe we're looking into the option of having a second-hand man for him. I think the name of Sven Mislintat certainly made the rounds, but that I don't know how realistic that ever was for him to sort of be the number 2 under Kehl. But I think for Terzic, or rather for Kehl to have Terzic as a resource and as a colleague, that's going to be worth a lot, because I don't know how much expertise and skill Sebastian Kehl actually brings to the table to guide a club like Borussia Dortmund as a sporting director. Is obviously huge shoes to fill, and it's going to be a big transition for Dortmund. It's going to be quite the change. So handing over the reins to Sebastian Kehl, I don't know how many Dortmund fans are actually like 100% convinced about that move, and we can talk about that plenty when it comes closer. But in the meantime, I think now is a really good time to make a cut and talk about a new signing. Borussia Dortmund did sign Gregor Kobel from VfB Stuttgart, 24-year-old. He signed a contract until 2026, I think, and he's 1.95 meters tall, and in his past bounced around between Hoffenheim, Augsburg, Stuttgart. Obviously, Rose, as we've already talked about in the previous show, said right from the outset that he assumes that, if you sign a goalkeeper like that he will play. Obviously, Roman Bürki is still around, which might have more to do with the funds that Roman Bürki is earning than anything else. Matthias, obviously a Swiss goalkeeper, so that should make you happy. But how happy are you really with this transfer, and do you think he is an instant upgrade over the goalkeepers that Dortmund previously had or still have?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's easy now for me to just say, well, definitely will be a Swiss goalkeeper for Dortmund in the next season. With Kobel, he had a very good season at Stuttgart. He's still very young, and, everybody knows that keepers tend to mature much later and have much longer careers on average.
Also, correction, he's still 23. Sorry.
23. Yeah.
Yes.
But, I mean, you think about Roman Weidenfeller, how long he was still actually playing very well, and then eventually it just drops off dramatically, but that's sports, As far as my thoughts on him, I think when you have a keeper that is showing so much talent and playing so well at a young age, who you can get from within the league, which obviously has its advantages. One, whether or not it's made to weaken an opponent, I wouldn't say that, but more about they understand the pace of the league, they understand who they're dealing with. Obviously, language is not an issue, because communication, as we have noted, that was one of the weaknesses of Roman Bürki's communication. So if you would throw in a keeper who doesn't even speak German, when you've got, right now you're looking at Akanji and Hummels right in front of you, so two German speakers, it would make it harder. Language is very important in the sport for communication, but for a keeper even more so. I don't know how vocal Kobel is. You can't really analyze that too terribly much in most Bundesliga matches that you see on TV, because they don't tend to focus on the keeper that often. As far as if it's an upgrade over Bürki and Hitz, I mean, he's better than Hitz, but I also still maintain that Bürki is better than Hitz. Is it an upgrade over Bürki? Kobel is coming off of a season with high confidence. Bürki is coming off a season where his confidence took a major hit, and he's such a confidence-based player that I would say initially, yes, it's an upgrade. Unfortunately, only time will tell. Because then we'll also see, is this a keeper issue, or is this a backline issue? Is this a tactical issue? And of course, with a new coach coming in, who really knows? And I agree with you. The reason that Roman Bürki is probably still at Borussia Dortmund is simply down to wages and transfer fee that's wanted, and just negotiations in the current pandemic market climate. So I do believe Bürki will move on, and then you'll have Kobel, who will be number one ahead of Hitz. Because if he's not ahead of Hitz, then I just don't understand the point of it all.
Yeah, I mean, Dortmund did pay 15 million euros for him, as far as I know. So I think it's fair to say that Roman Bürki is a really good shot stopper. His reflex saves are really good, and I don't know if Kobel is on that level, but certainly I'm very confident in saying that Kobel is better at saving penalties, because he did save a penalty already, which Bürki so far has not. Something that often annoyed me about Roman Bürki, and something I totally underestimated when Dortmund signed him, was his play with the ball on his feet, and him not being maybe the presence in the box that I feel he should have been. I feel that Dortmund, who are very much a possession-based team, when you pass the ball to Roman Bürki, or when he's supposed to pass the ball out, I think there are just a lot of punts into nowhere, and an area that Dortmund definitely need to improve. And I think Gregor Kobel is certainly someone who does that. So, even if it's a small detail, I think it really helps Dortmund and their entire build-up play. Even if it's minor, Bürki's long kicks to, I don't know, sometimes the sideline or so, just were very uninspiring, and doesn't often help to keep possession and to put opponents under pressure in the long term if you pass the ball back and he doesn't really have a good pass. Obviously, one thing I think Kobel does a little bit better is actually, grabbing balls out of the air that are crossed into the box. I can definitely see that he leaves his line a little bit easier. I think there was a reluctance in both Bürki and in Hitz to get off the line, and Dortmund did concede a couple of goals because of that, because they just didn't narrow the angle down close enough. Sometimes I feel like I don't know if that's the Dortmund goalkeeper school, the philosophy there, or something else, but either way, something that's a little bit annoying. So my hope is that Kobel is an improvement in these two departments. But obviously, you never really know how a goalkeeper makes the move from a club like Stuttgart to a club like Dortmund, because obviously, in theory, you should face fewer shots, and you will have to commit even fewer mistakes, because you will be judged a bit differently. And I think at Borussia Dortmund level, it's absolutely crucial that you hardly make any mistakes ever, which is of course not easy. And we'll see. Lars, what are you making of this transfer? I think it was definitely necessary for Dortmund to act on this position. What is your take?
Well, I absolutely love it. I think Kobel is their best chance at long-term stability at this crucial position. I think people ask me on Twitter, is he the second best goalkeeper in Germany right now? Which I guess people think should be Dortmund's target as, the second or third best club in the country. I don't think he is yet. I don't think many 23-year-olds would have a chance at that, unless, you're talking about a generational talent like Donnarumma, who wasn't available for Dortmund, even though people thought, he's out of contract at Milan, so he should be available. No, he wasn't for Dortmund, certainly not. But, given his talents, I think that Kobel before long can be in that discussion as the best goalkeeper after Manuel Neuer in the Bundesliga, and obviously Neuer being in his mid-30s, you don't know how long he's going to be able to go on. So there's a good chance, as I said, they will have long-term stability with him also, in my opinion, being a fairly obvious instant upgrade over what they have right now. And I think both points have already kind of been mentioned. First of all, he is definitely more of a vocal presence, which Dortmund will have gotten a very strong recommendation on from Sven Mislintat, who has publicly said a number of times how Stuttgart will miss that in Kobel, perhaps the most. And also has talked about his replacement, Florian Müller, who was on loan at Freiburg last season from Mainz, had a good season. He's even younger than Kobel, but doesn't have that presence yet. And Mislintat has made a point about, Müller having to grow into the kind of leadership role that Kobel had, despite Kobel only being, a couple of months or a few months older than Müller. So that he's definitely got that leadership presence, which I think every strong goalkeeper needs to have. I don't think, especially for a club like Dortmund, having the pure shot stopper that I think we can, in broad strokes, kind of characterize Bürki as proof is in the pudding over the last few years that hasn't really worked out, even though Bürki has had some very strong seasons in which the Yellowwallpod panel has defended him against major criticism in other media outlets. And the second part is, you mentioned his size and his willingness to leave the line. He's by far the most athletic goalkeeper Dortmund have had in many a year. I mean, given, Weidenfeller's age at the end, Weidenfeller was quite athletic, but he didn't have the size. Lengerek was tall but not as strong. And then Bürki obviously being... on the shorter end for goalkeepers.
Yeah, but Lars, the question is, can Kobel do a bicycle kick?
I mean, I don't know that it's going to be any worse than Weidenfeller did against Legia, so there's that. I mean, he's much better with the ball at his feet, as you mentioned. So, given his athleticism, his, if we want to call it that, bravery or aggressiveness or whatever, I think he is going to prove a very competent goalkeeper early on in his Dortmund career with, the highest ceiling anyone of Dortmund's goalkeepers have had over the last few years. So, yeah, 15 million for a goalkeeper is quite a bit of money. I think within Germany, only Manuel Neuer was even more expensive, but, that was 10 years ago and twice as much. So if you adjust for inflation, Kobel is nowhere near Manuel Neuer, and I guess that's also reflected in the relative performances, but still, in my opinion, the best solution for Dortmund this season, and especially also what Matthias mentioned. I think the candidate that was most often talked about if Kobel had decided to stay at Stuttgart or maybe move to the Premier League, which was also on, apparently anyway, was Mike Maignan, who moved to Milan to replace Donnarumma. And as Matthias mentioned, communication, German skills for a goalkeeper probably more important than for any other position. So if all things being equal, if we can assume that's kind of the case, then Kobel as a German speaker who knows the league will always get my nod anyway. So, as I said, I absolutely love this transfer.
That's great. I'm more excited than I was before. If it has the last Ballman seal of approval, we all know that never anything would go wrong with that. Mikel Merino. But
do you know how good Mikel Merino is? He never got a chance at Dortmund.
Right.
Just watch the Olympics. And by the way, not to get on too much of a tangent on Don Mikel Merino, but it was an absolute travesty, which admitted by Spanish media members that he wasn't in the Spain Euro squad, and if he was, obviously they'd be playing on Sunday instead of Italy.
Right. Matthias, let's move over to players that are rumored to extend their contract. We have Mo Dahoud, I think, who is very close to signing a new paper, and there's Mats Hummels. What are you making of these rumors, which obviously are not official yet or anything has been finalized, but at least that's reading the papers, that's sort of the trajectory we are on. What are you making of it?
I mean, they both make sense. Dahoud coming off his best season ever as a professional. And I think part of it was also down to then having a conversation with the new head coach in Marco Rose and seeing where he sees Dahoud fitting in, where the plans are. And I think this is a very clear signal that Dahoud will be a central figure for Rose and for Borussia Dortmund. And, he's still pretty young, so this is great. That's logical. Mats Hummels is, he actually was one of the German players at the Euros who I thought consistently probably played the best, which isn't saying much, I know, but I was impressed by him. I was surprised. I didn't think he would play as well as he did, given, just a lot of different variables. And so, if they tie him down, extend his contract maybe by another year or two, that probably indicates that he'll be ending his career as a Borussia Dortmund player, which I applaud 100%. Then we can almost ignore that little Bayern intermezzo at the beginning and then towards the end. And it helps solidify that area, that position, and guide new players that are coming in to fill the role next to him, depending on, what Akanji's plans are post Dortmund, because I think there's a good chance that Akanji moves on from Dortmund in the next 2-3 years, depending on his form curve, and maybe going to a place like the Premier League, which would actually be really suited to him, or he's suited to it, better said, also with his positioning and his pace and stuff like that. So overall, Dahoud, great. Hummels, I can see the logic behind that.
I mean, I think Hummels is 32 right now. He was born in 88, right? So I'm in 89, so he should be in that range somewhere. I think his contract would be running out in 2022, and I think the same applies to Mo Dahoud. Thus, to me, these are two very obvious decisions. Obviously, Hummels not getting any younger, and Dahoud, always still a little bit of a question mark how he behaves with fans in the stands. Nevertheless, what do you make of these decisions if they actually come to fruition?
Well, I think, first of all, it's important to note also that Dahoud is rumored to actually lower his wages in order to get a contract extension done. I was
going to ask you that because I didn't know that, and that obviously would be amazing for Dortmund.
Yeah, keeping a player who's still ascending, but has now, I think, as we talked about last week, 15 months or 18 months or however you want to look at it, of at least very solid production at a high level for them, with obviously being the last few months of those being quite exceptional even. So that's a no-brainer in my opinion. As you said, his contract running out soon would otherwise have put them in the bind of probably having to sell him, and you don't want to sell ascending players. unless it's for an absolutely absurd amount of money, which Dahoud wouldn't have commanded in a COVID market. Given also, that Thomas Delaney's deal is up in 22, I think Axel Witzel's deal is up in 22. So, if we're just looking at those three guys, I mean, it's pretty obvious who should get the first contract extension, and perhaps even the only one, and that is the youngest guy who's still ascending instead of Delaney, whose playing style is probably not conducive to playing at the highest of levels at 33, 34, and Witzel obviously coming off a major injury, massively impressive to be involved in the Euros as he was, but I mean he's already on the wrong side of 30 if we're allowed to say that, Stefan, us 89ers. Yeah. As for Hummels, his contract would have extended automatically after 22 or so matches, I think I read. So there wasn't any doubt that he was going to stay on longer than his current deal is running. I think they're going to tack on 1 year, and then he's in that kind of age and having achieved so much that he's probably going to take it year by year. Do I want to keep playing? As Matthias alluded to, I think it would be a cool story to keep him around at Dortmund now that he's come back and is fully accepted again. I mean, obviously they haven't played in front of fans for so long that maybe I misremember things, but I don't think there was any, resentment or animosity towards him, after that initial comeback from Bayern. So he's arguably the most natural leader Dortmund have right now, even though Marco Reus is clearly the right choice for captaincy. Hummels' playing style is not, predicated on things that get worse with age usually, so I don't see necessarily why he would get much worse over the next few years. I mean, at some point, every player runs out of battery juice, if you like, but I could definitely see Hummels being still a very good, at least Bundesliga defender at 34, 35. So to me, another no-brainer. And I think there's already talk about Hummels being involved in other capacities at the club after his playing career. I don't know what his plans are. Kind of can't see Hummels as a manager or getting involved in coaching youth players or whatever.
He's gonna succeed Nobby Dickel as a net radio and stadium announcer.
I mean, that would make Dortmund's YouTube channel watchable, which right now I don't think it is, at least if Norbert Dickel is involved. I don't know what his plans are, but obviously he's hugely intelligent, knows everything there is to know about football, has been one of the most successful German players of his time, so keeping those guys around, never a bad idea.
All right, so Lars, you were talking about ascending players. There are also descending players in Dortmund's team. Julian Brandt is one of them. Now, obviously, it has been decided that he will stay on. I don't think that's big of a surprise to anyone, really, but there were slight rumors that he might, head off to Arsenal to re-energize his career, yada yada. Nevertheless, quickly, I wanted to ask you on the subject. Is this, you think, a good decision by Dortmund to give Julian Brandt another chance and not try to sort of cut their losses on the pandemic market?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, of his 2 years at Dortmund, I think a little more than half of that was really good. So that he's capable of doing it outside of Leverkusen, if that's something people were wondering about. So I think a coaching change is always a good idea to keep talented players around, and we know how talented Brandt is.
He does look in better physical shape on the first images we've seen coming from the early diagnostics.
Yeah,
but is this something we can read anything into, or is this just bullshit?
I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, I remember the days of scouring Mario Götze's Instagram account for how he looked after summer break and spending time in LA with his then girlfriend, now wife. No, I don't think. Especially given that what what we see is pretty much catered to what we should see outside of like a training live stream, which I definitely didn't bother to watch with 12 players being around. I think that the thing you mentioned about the COVID market is especially important for these guys we know are much better than they showed over the last season or so. It doesn't make sense to sell on the cheap, and unless you get a great offer for someone like Brandt, it's better to stick with them and see whether they improve under new coaching in kind of a new environment, and if they don't, you in a normal market, which I'm not sure we're going to see in 22, you will probably, even after another disappointing season, get the same that you would get now. So there's no real benefit in not having him around, unless you definitely need the funds, which after the Sancho deal is kind of off the table for Dortmund.
All right, so Matthias, it's now the honor on you, I guess I bestow it on you to talk to me about a player that's returning on loan, or rather from loan, from 1. FC Köln, Marius Wolf, I guess a right winger / right back. I think especially in the later stages of Cologne's sort of battle against relegation, he was quite integral. However, to me, a player that never made sense to me to join Borussia Dortmund. I saw where they were coming from, but I also felt like he cashed in on one good season at Frankfurt, but does not really have the technical ability to really cut it with the other guys in Dortmund's midfield. Obviously, he's someone that can bring defensive stability, that can, make a lot of interesting runs and run into gaps. But I just feel like when we talk about defensive stability, not losing the ball in silly moments is also part of defensive stability. So, not someone that really can win duels 1v1, etc. So now he's back. I have a hunch that Dortmund will not rid themselves of him. So what kind of role do you foresee for Marius Wolf, if any, in the upcoming season?
Geez. So he had a very good season at Frankfurt, and then I would say he had a good season for Köln. And I think that summarizes a lot of things about who Marius Wolf is. I think he would do well at Hoffenheim. I think he would do well at Stuttgart. I don't think he is the kind of player for a team aspiring to do the things that Borussia Dortmund is aspiring to do. I think that was the nice way of saying something that doesn't make me sound like a total arrogant schmuck. But it's hard for me to be like, oh, they should use him for XYZ, because I don't want to use him for XYZ, A, B, or C. I just assume, take your losses and move them on, whether that's another loan or outright selling. I'll be honest, I don't see him as an upgrade on the right back position over Meunier or Moret, because Meunier is better defensively than Marius Wolf. Marius Wolf is really, really fast. He's very athletic. Apparently he's good in corner situations, I've heard. But he's really fast. He's like an Adama Traore. He's really fast. But Adama Traore at least has a little bit of technicality around him, even though I think he's total side tangent. Traore is totally overinflated by the English media. But Marius Wolf is like that. He's really fast, and then that's it. And I just don't think that's what Dortmund need. We don't need that type of player. If he would combine the pace with great technical ability and final third finishing and some decent defensive abilities, then he's a Hakimi clone. But that's not who he is. And so I don't see him advancing Dortmund to where they want to be. And I actually think he would help Dortmund regress a little bit, because he will make those mistakes, and he's not meant to play for a team that is on the front foot that will most likely have to break down opposition teams. I believe he is better suited for the team that is trying to be broken down. That's an English sentence. And hit teams on the counter. That's what he's made for, not Borussia Dortmund. So I personally just don't see him fitting in. And yeah, I could bullshit a place to put him, but that's what it would be, in my opinion, is bullshit.
Well, Lars, do you want to bullshit a place to put Marius Wolf anywhere, or do you want to move on to the rumor mill?
I mean, given Matteo Murray is unlikely to feature, I don't know, in the entire season, certainly the first half of the season, you could make the case that unless they get someone else in, he's your de facto second right-sided defender. I don't know if, that in a back four or back five, what is going to end up happening. He doesn't have a lot of qualities that Dortmund are looking for, as Matthias pointed out, but, if I'm looking at what Stefan Leiner brought to the table at Gladbach in terms of, intensity and making all those runs as like an auxiliary player in attack and defense, I could potentially envision a world in which Marius Wolf as, the backup to Thomas Meunier isn't the absolute worst decision in Dortmund history, but I mean, given the way I put it, I definitely would agree that it would be better for
It was
Dortmund.
like 10 asterisks there.
Yeah, but it's still a in the realm of possibility. I would say that he has some kind of role, but it would be obviously better for them to, I don't want to say rid themselves of him, because I mean they both signed a contract, and I don't like all the power being with the club. So if Marius Wolf decides I'm not gonna get loaned out for a third time, I want to fight for my place while earning admittedly great wages, then that's his prerogative and more power to him. But I think if something came up which would give him the chance to be a full-time starter somewhere and Dortmund to improve possibly upon Wolf, then that would be something that I would be in favor of.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure that it's not the ideal situation, but I'm fairly convinced that Marius Wolf will get some playing time in Dortmund, maybe as like a number, I don't know, 15, 16 in the squad rotation, but I really struggle to envision a world where Dortmund will not be in need of his services. So, there's that. Anyway, let's move on. I guess we can start with the Rose quote, which I will now paraphrase because I don't have it in front of me. But I think he was pretty much talking about the replacement of Jadon Sancho and talking about when you lose him, that you should look for a winger that has speed and crucially knows how to win a 1v1. And I feel like in the modern football, I guess previously before too, and especially when you're Borussia Dortmund, there's really, I really have a hard time seeing a way to get around a player that can, beat others 1v1, having this quality of dribbling around defenders. I just really struggle to see how Dortmund, if they not find this sort of player type that was described, will be successful in the long term. I just feel it's absolutely crucial to at least have one player of this quality, but obviously it's not easy to find these players. I think the number one target in this role would be Noni Madueke of PSV. But I'm not entirely sure whether this is a realistic signing or target or not. But Lars, maybe since you are the or one of the editors for Fußball.news, maybe you have read some more stuff in recent days that indicate one thing or another, and maybe already read up on his profile a little bit to talk about him.
I think the reporting over the last few days kind of indicates that PSV know that they are going to lose Daniel Malen, incidentally most likely to Dortmund, and Denzel Dumfries, who was one of the standouts for the Dutch national team at the Euros, giving them enough financial firepower to say no to selling Madueke as well, unless there comes a significant offer, or however you want to describe that. And given that we assume kind of that Daniel Mahlen is going to be the big ticket signing for Dortmund this season, I can't necessarily see them splashing, another, 20 million on Madueke, who doesn't necessarily remind me of Jadon Sancho in the way he dribbles, but in the way he plays all over the attack. I mean, Sancho was a winger by name, but oftentimes his average position would kind of lie in the middle, because he played on both wings and in the hole behind the striker, if you like. So Madueke does the same thing in a way. I mean, he can also play as a striker in a pinch. I suppose he's a bit taller and more physical than Sancho. The way he dribbles actually reminds me more of Dembele.
Also not bad.
Yeah, I mean, Dembele had that quick first step or first few steps where even if his first touch isn't great, he is beating defenders to the punch, if you like, and chasing down his own bad or not necessarily high quality first touch, which Madueke has a few too many of. He's still obviously a very young player, going the difficult route of leaving, I think, Spurs Academy. So Matthias might know more about him in that regard, going to PSV, playing for their youth team, and only last season really coming on strong under Roger Schmidt, the German coach. So I think actually for his development, it might not be the worst idea to actually spend more time at PSV, getting more playing time also, because they're going to lose Marlon and need to replace that attacking output. So I'm not convinced that he's actually going to end up in Dortmund anyway.
So if that's the case, and I have a hunch it is, Matthias, that puts Dortmund maybe in quite a bind, because I don't have any obvious alternatives on my table. Obviously, I do not get any scouting reports, neither do I really seek them out, to be honest. I have read, and I'm not sure what's to it, that Dortmund have shown interest in Leverkusen's Leon Bailey, who is 23 years old and whose contract is running out in 2023. I think he was heavily linked for a while with Bayern Munich. Would that be a decent option, and would it be a feasible option for Dortmund if Madueke is in fact not coming to the Black and Yellows?
No, I don't think so. I think Bailey and his representation are clearly eyeing the Premier League, and may as well head there after Leverkusen. My issues with Bailey is the fact, are that he is a very hot and cold player, in my opinion. I also see, if I look at the rumor list on Transfermarkt, like David Neres is on there from Ajax. Very gifted player, but he's also very hot and cold, very hit and miss. Dortmund already have a couple of those. And Sancho, yes, he was a little hit and miss in the beginning, but he was very consistent overall over the last 3 seasons. A few little spots here and there, like everybody has. And Leon Bailey, to me, I'm not going to say his mentality issues, but I just have a lot of question marks there, and I just don't think it would be the right move for club or player, to be honest. When I look at players that are listed on there that kind of fit a wing role, that are other names that don't play for PSV, just go through them. I mean, Jonathan Ikone is on there from Lille, but I think he'd be way too much money. Rafinha from Leeds, same thing, too much money. Then you look at someone like Wilfried Zaha, too much money. Callum Hudson-Odoi, too much money. I just don't see any of those really coming through. I think it'll be Daniel Mahlen, and then kind of seeing the players that Dortmund do have at their disposal. at the current time. And possibly, I mean, who knows? Maybe Moukoko, you shift him out to the wing occasionally and have him kind of in that floater role because he has the skill, he has the speed, he has the size to be on the wing because he's not a huge, big guy. He could still become that because he's so young. But so I think Dortmund have options already internally. If you add Daniel Malen, I think then you're kind of in a good position because Torgan Hazard, he can provide those unique spark moments. I mean, not quite like Jadon Sancho could, but I think then you kind of have what you have. Everybody else, I just don't see anybody being more financially feasible than Madueke. And Lars already said all the reasons why PSV probably wouldn't necessarily let all of their good attacking players go in one season.
Yeah, also you can make the case that when Dortmund actually splash the cash for Daniel Malen, that maybe a player like Madueke is then not on the list because Dortmund also have other gaps to fill. Lars, let me switch it around to you and maybe broaden the discussion a little bit. If Dortmund do not get a replacement like for Jadon Sancho, which I don't think Malen really is, do you think that they're going to try to get someone, or as Matthias just alluded to, maybe try to solve this internally with, hoping that Moukoko, Reina, and Hazard sort of improve, and maybe Julian Brandt can play a role, maybe in a different setup, in that regard? I'm not entirely sure. If you think that it's actually not going to be a like-for-like replacement, where do you think Dortmund should splash their remaining resources, if they have any, in what areas of the pitch?
Well, I kind of touched on Malen as the Sancho replacement last week, which, as you said, isn't really like for like. Malen is much more of an attacking player, even though he started out wide at PSV as well. Attacking player in the sense of playing in a two-man striker setup as kind of the role that I think he would probably be best in my limited experience of his qualities, to be fair. We can assume that they are trying to get someone else as well. I think it definitely makes some sense to at least try to replicate some of the qualities Sancho has had that Malen doesn't bring to the table, just to diversify your assets, if you like, and get or have higher chances of being successful. I mean, basically, replacing Sancho with two players would be a good idea because you are very, very, very unlikely to get one player who's going to be as good as Jadon Sancho was over the last 3 seasons, especially. But as we've now talked about, it kind of feels hard to point out who that might be, unless it is Madueke for whatever deal they can hash out with Eindhoven. So I'm kind of leaning towards the idea that Dortmund are going to play in a 4-4-2 diamond with Malen and Haaland, or Haaland and Moukoko, or Malen and Hazard. So a lot of flexibility up front in personnel and also in kind of playing style. And in that kind of system, the need for a dribbler is not as high as in other formations. So I think the smart money is probably on Dortmund not finding a like-for-like replacement for Sancho, so eliminating the highest of needs for such a player. I mean, obviously you would still like to have a Sancho type, even if you're playing a diamond, just put him anywhere and he's going to produce. But, it doesn't seem likely, especially this being, a COVID market, and Dortmund not only splashing the cash, as you put it, on players, but also needing to, cover some of the losses they've had over this last year and a half or so. And given that also, I'm not convinced that they are going to end up doing much more than signing Malen. I mean, I definitely can't see them, which is being rumored, especially today again from local media in Mainz, that they are going to spend 15 to 20 million on Jeremiah Saint-Just, who is a good defender, very pacey, could play center half or right back in certain systems that Marco Rose might run. But I can't see them spending that much on a player who quite possibly doesn't improve your starting 11 this season. The only other thing that makes sense to me is the rumor about Marcel Halstenberg of Leipzig, who I think it's fairly safe to assume is going to end up coming to Dortmund. The question is more, is it this year for a moderate transfer fee or next season on a free transfer? He's very versatile defensively as a left side center half or a left back, who would also play left wing back, which, would offer them some sort of solution for Guerrero. The backup situation with Nico Schulz isn't, as we all know, ideal for Dortmund. Could play in a pinch at, left side center back, or not necessarily in a pinch in the back three. I think he's their most logical solution at left side center back, with Hummels in the middle and Akanji on the right. Allowing Emre Can to be exclusively a defensive midfielder, which I think makes sense in our opinion, if I can say that.
Yeah.
Also with, as I said before, Delaney and Witzel possibly not being around for too much longer. That would make some sense to me. And if for whatever reason, like if they get a lot of money for Birki and Schulz and Wolf and they have too much money lying around, obviously a right back or a center half that can play right back would be on my quote-unquote wish list. But I mean, I think fans need to realize what kind of situation the club is in. They didn't expect and plan for an entire season without spectators last season. We already know that there's going to be limited access for fans this season, which they are also not particularly happy about. So we can't just spend their cash wantonly in a COVID market, and they are definitely not going to do that.
Yeah, I mean, if I could sell players, just like, if regardless of whether Dortmund would have to find a buying club or not, I'd probably obviously would try to get rid of Meunier. I would try to sell Schulz. Witzel definitely too. I don't think he has much of a future. I'm not entirely sure whether we need Felix Passlack, and Marius Wolf also should be out the door in my book. And I think that's it for now. I actually would keep Brandt. Delaney, obviously a player I like, so I personally wouldn't sell him, but I can see an argument for doing so as well. If I didn't mention Emre Can as a player that should be sold, I'm doing it now, because also not my most favorite footballer. So I would obviously clear house quite a bit, but I know that's obviously not going to happen. So I don't know how satisfying this transfer summer will be for anyone, really. Matthias, if we look at a 4-4-2 diamond shape now, I think who will play in the back four is pretty clear. It probably will be Guerrero on the left, then you'll have Hummels, Akanji in central defense, and then on the right you will have Meunier, if nothing else happens. But how would you actually form that diamond? I feel like that's a nice little exercise before we end this show, and then I'll have Lars do the same exercise. So get ready, Lars.
Well, let's see. The diamond in midfield. I'm going to start at the top of the diamond. I feel like that's probably going to be Marco Reus's position, because he could also drift a little bit there. At the base of the diamond, I could see Rose opting for a very steady and safe pair of hands, so to speak, or pair of feet, in Axel Witzel. And then the two ahead of Witzel, I would say the chances are very good that would be a Dahoud Bellingham combo. With if Malen comes, then you'd have Malen and Haaland up top. That's how I could envision it forming.
Sounds very 4-3-3-y, but fair enough. Lars, what do you think? How is it going to shake out?
I think in a perfect world, at least against most opponents, that's probably what I would go with as well. So I'm going to give you the alternative of assuming Marcel Halstenberg coming to Dortmund this season already, which I think is definitely still on and mostly dependent on Leipzig getting Maxence Lacroix out of Wolfsburg, which in turn might be dependent on Sebastian Bornau or Bornau, I don't necessarily know, of Cologne going to Wolfsburg. So a lot of transfer dominoes to fall, if you like. So assuming Halstenberg comes, I could see, especially in certain situations, him playing left back, Guerrero playing left central midfielder, which would then give you the option of playing Dahoud at the base of midfield. So let's assume they are expecting to have, 75% possession against Bielefeld or someone of that ilk. I could see Dahoud as the 6, if you like, if you want to call it that, Bellingham as the right-sided 8, Guerrero as the left-sided 8, in that playmaking role he played under Tuchel for some time, and obviously Reus at the top of the diamond with, as Matthias said, in an ideal world that is probably going to be Haaland and Malen, but might just as well be Moukoko and Azar, or I don't want to say Tigges and Gio Reyna or Renier if he's even going to be around, but just to illustrate that they have a lot of options. And the great thing about the idea of the diamond, which is a system Rose definitely likes, to me, is that especially the three lower halves or lower parts of the diamond can, especially with the personnel Dortmund have available, can be quite interchangeable. As well as the top of the diamond and the two strikers. So if you have, let's go with what Matthias said, Witzel, Dahoud and Bellingham, they can all appear in at the base of midfield, they can all appear in the half spaces. Reus, Malen and Haaland, I mean, you would assume that Haaland is, the forward most player of those three, but they will definitely switch positions here and there and make runs that confuse and stress the defense. So I think there's a lot of potential for flexibility, which in the wake of losing perhaps your single most creatively dominant player in Sancho would definitely serve Dortmund well. So the more I think about it, the more I'm kind of talking myself into the idea that it would make the most sense, also in the sense of not being able to replace Sancho like for like. So let's not even try that. Let's instead try to focus on, broadening the spectrum.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. I'm also very intrigued to see how and where Julian Brandt would fit into that equation, because I think mostly I would have him as like a Marco Reus deputy, where he plays in that hole as well as a number 10. I don't know how much I want him in defensive midfield, because his defensive liability is still too much of a liability. So I guess that's the role of a super sub. Obviously, when Dortmund spent 25 million on him, I think he was more planned as a play as a starter. I also wonder what this season will bring for Gio Reyna, who is 18. Still very young, but we know that players with a lot of talent at his age also want more playing time, and I think he had quite an okay run in terms of playing time last season, and wants to build on that. Obviously, Jude Bellingham has been quite terrific, and I see him play a lot. I also don't know how fit and how healthy Witzel actually will be in the long term. His return has been miraculous, but let's see how that goes in the long term. There's one rumor, obviously, that popped up in the last days, was that of Marcel Sabitzer from RB Leipzig joining Dortmund. I don't think that's a realistic thing that's going to happen. Matthias, do you think Dortmund have to worry about him joining Dortmund. I personally am not the biggest Marcel Sabitzer fan, so this would be a transfer that I'm not entirely psyched about, to be honest. It would be like, I don't want to liken this transfer to an Emre Can transfer, but, what would you make of this? But I honestly don't think it's going to happen.
I don't think it's going to happen for a few reasons. One, financially. I think Leipzig would probably want too much money. I think Sabitzer would want too much money. And I don't see a place for him in the side. Who would you take out to put him in where you're going to say, well, that makes sense. That's a significant upgrade over what Dortmund have. I just don't see anybody that fits that. So I think it's, before recording, Lars made the great point of maybe it's just, an agent putting out the name to kind of drive up the interest to move him somewhere else, which I think that's more likely. Dortmund would be a weird choice for me, for both the club and for him, because that's not really an area of the pitch where Dortmund need any more players.
All right. I think that should conclude this episode. I'm sure we'll have more stuff to discuss next week. Lars, are there any final thoughts or words you want to lose or say before we leave this platform?
No.
Okay. Well, it could have been that there was something I overlooked that you wanted to mention or not. So,
do we need to talk about a possible Delaney exit to Wolfsburg, which has been rumored for a number of times?
I don't know. I'm not feeling this one. I don't know. I don't think that Delaney, if he were to move, that Wolfsburg would be the destination. I'd rather see him in the Premier League, to be honest. I don't know.
I think he probably thinks that himself, but Wolfsburg is a Champions League side this season, and they have, if you think about it, kind of a spiritual predecessor of Thomas Delaney in their new head coach Mark van Bommel, who was much more of an asshole than Delaney. But
I was going to say, I don't know how much I'm liking this comparison.
Yeah, but somewhat similar, in terms of, Delaney's not an asshole on the pitch, but he's definitely a nuisance who, in his own words, as he once admitted, likes to commit fouls and doesn't mind collecting bookings if it helps the team. So I could definitely see a world in which Mark van Bommel looks at Delaney and thinks that kind of player is kind of what I wanted to be, without the shithousery to the absolute last degree. So I could see that happening, but still more likely, as you said, that he's going to England. But I do think there's a very real chance that he's not ending his contract at Dortmund next season, given, as we talked about, they have quite a few options in midfield. He's, I think, 29 years old. And especially after strong performances at the Euros, should have a market in the Premier League. So I think, us included, as we talked about last week, him being the most underrated Dortmund player, we need to prepare ourselves potentially for the exit of Delaney, which in turn should give them more funds for other things.
Well, that's something that we can shift over to next week, I find, or the week after that. I don't know whether it will be on weekly or bi-weekly. We'll see. In the meantime, though, Matthias, how can people read more of you on the internets?
Well, you can follow me on Twitter at Matthias Suk.
Very well. And Lars, where can people find you and your work?
I'm not going to talk about my work because it's in German and people always ask for translations, and I'm not a translation service, so just follow me on Twitter or don't at Lars Pollmann.
Fair enough. You can follow me at Stefan Butzko on Twitter. You can follow all of us at Yellowwallpod on Twitter and Facebook. And if you want to subscribe to the show, you can do that via SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher. Can even Google us in the Google podcast. Just type in Yellowwallpod as one word and you'll find it. I can vouch for it. It's there. Also, you can subscribe to our channel on YouTube and all the other good stuff. So please subscribe and like and whatnot. And in the meantime, I'll be off now and have some nice lunch. Although it's pretty late for that already. But nevertheless, I hope everyone stays safe. And as always, thank you for listening. Goodbye.